Gamification is a bullshit term, but we're going to talk about applied game design. So it's the concept of using game design theory and applying it into particular applications or UI or UX. So what is the problem with gamification? Crappy rewards. Like everything that we've seen so far, the extrinsic motivation piece is the piece that's missing, right? So if you look at something like Foursquare. So Foursquare, the enjoyable part is the intrinsic motivation, right? The act of checking in, it's telling everyone, hey dudes, I checked into the Lackman, or I checked into the Brandery, or I checked into the rehab center, whatever it may be. But then they have, so that's not the gamification piece, right? Though that's just you're using the application. Then for them, the layer that the gamification layer on top of that is badges. You check in and you get badges, and you may have badges that other people don't have, right? And that's when we dive into manufacturing design, and this is really kind of the core of what I want to talk about and what gamification is. Gamification is manufacturing desire. Teaching people to do something or change behavior in a way that they enjoy the process, right? And I'll get into specifically the word enjoy in a minute. So the machine is got some smaller parts, right? The initial part is a trigger, so it's intrinsic or extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic is like a feeling of accomplishment, like you actually completed something. Extrinsic is rewards. Big thing with game mechanics and building games, where people are always saying, Brad, I'm sure you've heard this, like, where's the fun? How do I make it fun? Fun is a terrible design word. It's subjective. It's completely and utterly emotionally subjective, right? So instead of saying fun, what you really need to ask is, what experience do I want the user to have? Do I want it to be terrifying? Do I want it to be, gut-wrenching, or do I want it to be stressful? Do I want it to be joyful? Do I want it to be delightful? Do I want it to be surprising? Like these are the types of things that you should be asking when it comes to your experience, as opposed to just, do I want it to be fun? Friction is great. So to create friction and give them an opportunity to win that reward. And so reward without effort is devalue, and action is required for desire to be achieved, right? Like that feeling of accomplishment doesn't happen unless friction exists in the first place, right? They need to work to get that reward. Very easy one. I actually thought that Go Wallet did an incredible job when it comes to collectability. Unfortunately, they had the requirement, the action piece, the friction piece was too high, because to collect items you actually had to be in physical locations. But Pokemon's a perfect example of something that's done collectability well, right? Along with that is rarity, right? The idea that you can actually obtain an item that's extremely rare or difficult to possess. Now, what's interesting with rarity specifically is you have competition, right? Well, I get the item that's more rare than the other person, but it's an even playing field, right? Like there's no, you may not necessarily, especially if the item's randomized, like it's surprise and delight mechanic, not necessarily a competition mechanic. Because if you can go in and say, well, you get this special item that very few people get, you're adding to that mechanic, and they want to get that reward, so they play it more often as opposed to playing it more often to get it just because the other person didn't get it. Does that make sense? I don't know. Discovery is another extremely great one, right? This idea of being able to grow with the world that's around you and learn and see what's just around the corner. That concept of, I don't know what's there, I want to go see what's right there. Pretty self-explanatory. Puzzles, obviously, are super easy. Being able to solve those puzzles are that feeling of accomplishment, as well as the reward you get after for completing the puzzle, what that would look like. Risk is a great one. This is a game called Demon Souls. I don't know if any of you guys played it. It's terrible. It's the worst. Because if you die, you lose everything, right? So you can play it, and you know, it's extremely hard, extremely difficult, and you have a chance to lose it all. So just another interesting mechanic that's not competitive. Like there's nothing, it has nothing to do with what the other person is doing, right? But you can find some interesting ways to apply that to what you're building. And then, you know, obviously the opposite of competition, right, is being cooperative. Like what can you build that has you and another person working together towards some goal? We see that a lot in Zynga games, right? Of course they do it to an annoying level where cooperation is required to actually do anything. Game design, when you're doing game design, when you're building a game, when you're designing a game, you want to think about the flow that the user has as they're playing the game. You know, are the goals clear? Does it make sense what the person is supposed to achieve to that user?